I stood outside the cemetery gate that morning. No one knew I was there. No one cared. The sky was gray, swollen like it too had something to mourn. A gentle rain fell over the marble stones, but I didn't move. I just watched. Watched them gather. Watched them lower his casket. Watched them cry over a man they thought they knew. I wasn't invited. I wasn't mentioned in the obituary. I wasn't welcome at the burial. He was my husband for 22 years. And still they buried him like I never existed. I watched his new family, yes, new. The woman standing at the front, clinging to their teenage daughter like a widow, wasn't just someone he met after our divorce. She was someone I knew. Someone who once lived in my house. The guests hugged her. They whispered condolences. They whispered lies. They whispered stories he must have told them. But none of them knew mine. Because for a decade I said nothing. I didn't show up when he vanished. I didn't fight when he took everything and left me with silence. I didn't chase him when he started a new life as if I was a chapter best forgotten. But what they didn't know was, I kept everything. Every voicemail. Every receipt. Every journal entry. Every DNA result. They thought he took the truth with him to the grave. But I was the truth. And that day, as they stood around his grave, mourning the man they thought they knew, I was already planning the story they would never forget. Because before the dirt could even settle on his coffin, I had already sent the first envelope. And inside was everything. Before the silence, before the closed casket, before the obituary without my name, there was me, Diana. I wasn't extraordinary by any headline standard. I didn't make speeches. I didn't break records. But I held a family together. I showed up every morning to a high school filled with lost kids, sat across from teenagers whose parents didn't see them, and tried to remind them that someone still did. I was a counselor, a quiet one, but I listened harder than most. I met Mark when I was 25. He walked into the library during a parent-teacher conference. He wasn't a parent yet. He was helping his sister raise her child. He had this way of folding his sleeves that made him look like he'd come from somewhere important. And when he smiled, it didn't feel like it came from his mouth. It felt like it came from his chest. He said he admired women who worked in silence. That was the first thing he ever told me. I didn't know that would be the very thing he'd later use to erase me. We married 2 years later. Small ceremony. Just family. Or what little was left of it. He brought his niece, a delicate 4-year-old girl named Natalie. Her mother, his sister, was struggling with addiction. He didn't want Natalie to end up in foster care, so he took her in. I raised her like my own. Picked her up from preschool. Held her when she cried over nightmares. Sat beside her at dance recitals and doctor's appointments. Natalie never once called me stepmom. She called me Mama D. And for a long time that was enough. Our home wasn't luxurious, but it was stable. I cooked dinner most nights, packed lunches every morning, and kept a photo of our wedding day in the hallway. Him in a navy suit, me in a second-hand gown with my mother's pearls around my neck. Mark was charming. Reliable. He laughed a lot in the early years. Always found ways to surprise me. A necklace in the cereal box, love notes tucked inside my daily planner. But somewhere around year 12 the air shifted. The surprises stopped. The laughter slowed. And suddenly he started traveling. First it was just business. At least that's what he said. Just a training, he'd tell me. Just a conference. He'd mumble as he packed a bag at 5 a.m. I'd kiss his cheek, hand him his itinerary, and wave him off like any loyal wife would. But then the trips grew longer. The explanations thinner. One evening I found his phone face down on the bathroom sink. Locked. It wasn't the lock that caught me off guard. It was the fact that he changed it. And when I asked him why, he laughed. Laughed like I just accused him of robbing a bank. You're overthinking, he said. You always do this when you're stressed. He kissed my forehead. But he never gave me the password. The man who once left open love letters on the kitchen table now guarded grocery receipts like classified documents. There was a business card once, found it in his jacket while doing laundry. It wasn't a company I recognized. I searched for it online. No website. No office. Just a disconnected number and a town I'd never been to. When I showed him, he smiled. It's a supplier contact, he said, and that was that. With Mark, there were no fights, just quiet dead ends. That's what made it harder. There were no bruises. No shouting matches. Just gentle withdrawal. And how do you explain heartbreak when it looks like silence? But I wasn't naive. I started keeping a journal. Not for drama. Not for revenge. Just to keep the pieces together in case one day, someone asked me why I stayed. Or worse, why I disappeared. The things that break a marriage rarely crash in like thunder. They slip in like shadows. Quiet. Familiar. Easy to explain away. I started to notice it in small things. The kind of small that doesn't scream at you, but rather, pokes you at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep. Our 10th anniversary came and went with no card, no dinner, no mention. He claimed a meeting ran late. I ordered Chinese takeout and waited on the couch, still in the dress I wore to work. He came home past midnight. No apology. Just tired eyes and a muttered, "Sorry baby, you know how it is." But no, I didn't know how it was. He started showering at odd hours. Took his phone into the bathroom. Slept with it under his pillow. The bed grew colder, even when his body was lying right there beside me. We stopped touching. Not in anger. Just indifference. He began pulling away from Natalie too. He used to attend her school performances, sit in the front row, record her solos. But now, he'd scroll his phone the whole time, if he showed up at all. When I asked what was going on, he'd smile like I was being dramatic. "Diana, you're tired. We both are. Let's not start something that doesn't exist." It wasn't the words. It was the tone. Like he'd already moved on, and I was the last one to realize it. Then one evening I found it. He was at a weekend retreat. Another supplier summit in Vermont. I was doing laundry, the usual Saturday ritual. And as I sorted through his coats, something fluttered to the floor. A napkin. Folded. Lipstick smeared across the edge. A deep berry color. Not my shade. Not my brand. And beneath the lipstick? Ao teu logo. One that wasn't in Vermont. I sat there on the laundry room floor holding it in my hands for a long time. Not crying. Not screaming. Just sitting. Trying to remember the last time he touched me like he cared. The napkin wasn't confirmation. It was validation. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being overly sensitive. Something was happening. I waited for him to return. I didn't mention the napkin right away. I wanted to see if he'd say anything. Offer a lie before I asked. He didn't. Just walked in with that same tired smile and a duffel bag full of folded alibis. That night, after dinner, I placed the napkin gently on the kitchen table in front of him. He looked at it. Laughed. "Really, Diana? You're doing this now?" "What is this?" I asked. "It's probably from the conference dinner. The waitress gave me extra napkins. Maybe she was wearing lipstick. Who knows?" I asked him why the napkin had a different hotel logo. "You're reading too much into things," he said. "You always do this. Always trying to make something out of nothing. It's exhausting." I remember standing there staring at him. He was so calm, so trained. And I realized in that moment, I wasn't talking to someone caught in a lie. I was talking to someone used to lying. And that hurt more than the lipstick. So I said nothing more. I picked up the napkin, placed it in a Ziploc bag, and added it to the drawer in my nightstand, the one where I kept my journals. And that was the day I stopped asking questions. I started collecting answers instead. Quietly, I watched how he moved. Noticed how his eyes never really looked at me anymore, they looked past me. I began logging his trips. Noted when the receipts didn't match the itinerary. Logged the miles on the car when he returned. Took photos of everything he left behind. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was becoming his archivist. If this part broke your heart like it broke mine, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let's talk about it. I thought betrayal would come with a confession, a letter, a confrontation. But sometimes betrayal just vanishes. It was a Thursday morning. I remember because I woke up to the sound of birds outside our window, and the absence of his keys on the dresser. His side of the bed was made. His duffel bag was gone. His toothbrush gone too. No note.
No voice mail. No goodbye.
First I assumed it was another trip. Another supplier meeting. Another 48 hours of silence. But then 48 hours became 72. Then a week. I called his phone. It rang once, then disconnected. I texted. I emailed. I even contacted his assistant at the office. He's on leave, she said, confused. Didn't he tell you? No, he didn't. So I called the police, filed a report, showed them the car was missing. They asked if we'd been fighting. I said no, because technically we hadn't. They asked if I thought he was in danger. I said I wasn't sure. Because what do you say when your marriage disappears without a trace, and you're still sleeping in his t-shirt hoping it's all just a mistake? They filed it as a non-criminal adult disappearance. Maybe he just needed time, the officer said. People do that, you know? No, people don't just do that. Husbands don't just vanish unless they were never really there to begin with. The days turned to weeks. I stopped showing up to work. Couldn't bring myself to stand in front of students and tell them everything would be okay, when I didn't believe it myself. His family stopped answering my calls. His mother, who used to invite me to church, suddenly wasn't feeling well every time I asked to visit. His brother, who once offered to help fix our garage door, now said, "Look, Diana, maybe you just weren't enough for him." That sentence, those 8 words, they splintered something in me. I wasn't enough. After 22 years of loyalty, of packing lunches, of raising a child that wasn't mine, of staying up during his sicknesses, of smiling through every lie, I wasn't enough. Natalie asked where he went. I told her the truth. "I don't know, baby." And she, at just 15, nodded and said, "He never really stayed anyway." That broke me in a way I didn't expect, because it made me realize I was the only one still holding on to a version of him that never existed. Then came the call. My friend Carla, we met in grad school, hadn't spoken in years, called out of the blue. She had just flown back from Florida. "I saw Mark," she said. My breath stopped. He was boarding a flight, holding hands with a woman and a little girl. They looked like a family. I asked her to describe the woman. She paused. Tall, dark hair. Very young. Maybe late 20s. He called her Elena. I dropped the phone. Elena. The nanny. Flashback. She came into our home 5 years earlier. A part-time childcare student from New Mexico State. Kind. Quiet. Sweet with Natalie. She wasn't flashy or seductive. Nothing about her set off alarms. She wore glasses, oversized sweaters, and always had her nose in a book. I remember hiring her because she reminded me of myself when I was younger. For 1 year, she lived with us. Cleaned, helped with homework, prepared meals. Then suddenly she quit. No drama. No warning. Just packed up and left. She told me she needed to care for a sick relative back home. I gave her a hug. Wished her well. I even slipped $200 into her purse. Because I was the kind one. The blind one. I never thought to question her closeness with Mark. Never thought twice when she'd laugh at his corny jokes, or linger a little too long in the kitchen after he came home. Because I trusted him. I believed in us. And now she was the one boarding planes with him, raising a new child, living the life I built, in another state, under another name. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. She didn't steal my husband, he handed himself over. And then I turned the page. Because I wasn't done writing. Memories have a strange way of rearranging themselves. When you're living through them, they seem harmless, ordinary. But after the damage is done, you start to see the cracks that were always there. After Carla mentioned the name Elena, it was like a dam broke in my mind. I couldn't stop the flashbacks. She came to us in the fall. Fresh-faced, polite, grateful for the job. Elena said she was studying child psychology, wanted hands-on experience. Mark interviewed her in the living room while I made tea in the kitchen. I remember hearing them laugh. That easy, gentle kind of laughter that sounds like it belongs to people who understand each other, not strangers meeting for the first time. I peeked around the corner and saw her tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes soft, fixed on him. I dismissed it. She was young. He was older. Married. And I trusted him. She moved in a week later. Just one guest room, her own bathroom, part-time hours. Natalie adored her. Elena braided her hair in the mornings, left little notes in her lunchbox, and taught her how to bake banana muffins on Sundays. It should have been a relief. A good nanny was hard to find. But over time I noticed other things. Mark started lingering more in the kitchen. They'd laugh over private jokes. Whisper about funny things that happened while I was gone. One night, I came home early from a staff meeting. The house was quiet. I walked upstairs, stopped just before the hallway. I heard them, Mark and Elena, talking in low voices outside her bedroom door. I couldn't hear every word, but I remember the sound of her crying. Then silence. Then his voice. You didn't do anything wrong. I stepped around the corner. Mark looked up, startled. Elena wiped her face and gave a small, nervous laugh.
I'm sorry, Diana.
I didn't mean to worry you. It's nothing. Just stupid boy drama. Mark jumped in before I could ask more. She had a rough night. Give her space. And I did. I believed him. Because that's what I did. I believed him. Again and again. But now, as I looked back years later, the scene came back in pieces. Her red eyes. The way he stood slightly in front of her like a shield. The guilt in his face disguised as concern. I should have known. The final week Elena worked for us was different. She moved slower. Glowed more. Smiled to herself when no one was talking. I asked her if she'd met someone. She blushed, looked at the floor. Maybe. Then she changed the subject. A few days later, she told us she had to leave. Family emergency, she said. My aunt in Texas has cancer. I need to go help her. I didn't question it. I gave her 2 weeks' pay, hugged her at the front door. She looked over my shoulder when she said goodbye, toward the driveway where Mark stood watching silently. And just like that, she was gone. No forwarding address. No follow-up. No goodbye to Natalie. But now I saw it for what it was. She wasn't leaving something behind. She was taking something with her. A secret. A child maybe. A piece of my life I didn't even know had been taken. And the most brutal part? It wasn't just the betrayal. It was how long I'd lived next to it. How long I shared my dinner table with a lie. I started digging through old receipts, photos, emails. I found a grocery bill. Prenatal vitamins charged to Mark's card the same month Elena left. I found a library book in Elena's old room. The return slip tucked inside was dated 3 days after she supposedly moved away, which meant she hadn't gone far. She had never really left. She just left me. And Mark, he let me cry over her departure. He let me cook for him that night. He let me fall asleep in his arms, believing we were still a family. I wasn't mourning a husband who died. I was mourning a woman who disappeared right under my nose, with everything I never even knew was mine. Wait, did you see that coming? If your jaw dropped like mine did, tap the subscribe button right now, and ring that notification bell, because what happens next will leave you speechless. There's a moment, right after the heartbreak and just before the rage, when you stop crying, and you start collecting. Not tears, not memories, evidence. I told no one what I suspected. Not my coworkers. Not my friends. Not even Natalie. I kept moving through the world like a woman trying to survive, but inside I had shifted. I wasn't trying to save the past anymore. I was trying to find the truth it buried. The first thing I did was pull out the folder where I kept every receipt Mark ever brought home, hotel charges, flight itineraries, credit card statements. Then I did something I never imagined I'd do. I called a private investigator. His name was Edward. Retired cop. Quiet. Efficient. Not the type to ask why a woman was suddenly looking for her legally still alive husband. I gave him everything. Addresses, past employers, banking patterns, even the photo Carla had taken at the airport. I don't want revenge, I told him. I want answers. It didn't take long. 3 weeks later, Edward sat across from me at a diner and slid over a thick manila envelope. I opened it slowly. Inside, a new address, 2 states over. A business license, boutique wine distributors, under the name Nanny Estates. Photos, Mark smiling with Elena in a vineyard, arms around a little girl. A school enrollment form. The girl's name was Sophie, age 9. She had Mark's dimples. Elena's name was listed as the mother. But something about that girl. The shape of her mouth. The arch in her eyebrows. She looked familiar. And then, I stopped breathing. Because suddenly it clicked. That little girl, Sophie, looked exactly like Natalie at age 9. I wasn't just looking at Elena's daughter. I was looking at my nieces. Flashback. Natalie, the girl I raised, the girl who called me Mama D. She started acting strange at 16. She lost weight. Threw up often. Wouldn't look me in the eye. I asked if something was wrong. She said it was stress. Exams. Growing up. One night I found her crying on the bathroom floor. She looked at me and whispered, "I made a mistake. But it's too late now." A week later she collapsed in school. Rushed to the hospital. That night I'll never forget it. Mark and I stood outside the delivery room stunned. I didn't even know she was pregnant. The doctor came out after hours of complications and told us, Natalie didn't make it, a cardiac event. She delivered a stillborn. That was what we were told. No funeral for the baby. No birth certificate. Just silence. And grief. And a hole in my chest that I never fully filled. But now I knew. It was all a lie. The baby wasn't stillborn. The baby was Sophie. Mark gave her to Elena. Raised her as his child in another home, in another life while I mourned a child who never died. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It hardened. Because betrayal isn't just about who leaves. It's about what they steal when they go. He didn't just walk away from our marriage. He stole the only living piece of Natalie I had left. And gave her to the same woman who once folded my laundry. I felt sick. But I didn't cry. I closed the folder. Thanked Edward. And went home. To begin my own quiet reckoning. Some memories never fade. If you believe some wounds run deeper than time, share this video with someone who understands. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it? I spent weeks rehearsing what I would say. I practiced the look I'd give Elena when I told her I knew. I imagined the moment Sophie would hear the truth, not from them but from me. But sometimes, the universe ends your conversation before it begins. I was sitting in the waiting room at the clinic, just a routine checkup. A woman beside me flipped through the local paper. I wasn't reading it, but my eyes landed on the page she held. I saw a name. Mark Everett Caldwell. Age 49. Passed away suddenly at home. Survived by his partner Elena and daughter Sophie. No mention of a first wife. No mention of Natalie. Just erased. I must have made a sound because the woman looked at me. "Did you know him?" I nodded. But I didn't say how. I sat in my car for an hour after that. Staring at the obituary. Rereading the words that made my entire life sound like a footnote he chose to omit. He died the same way he lived near the end, quietly. Without warning. Without answering for anything. I wasn't invited to the funeral. No one called. Not even his mother. So I went anyway. I didn't wear black. I wore deep navy, the color I wore the day I married him. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder to myself. I was not a mistake. I was his wife. The service was held in a small church on the outskirts of the town they'd relocated to. Simple. Closed casket. People cried. Elena cried. Sophie sat beside her, confused, clinging to her mother's hand. I stayed outside. Behind a tree, far enough to stay invisible. Close enough to remember how much he once meant to me. I didn't cry. I had already buried my grief. This was something else. After the service, people trickled out, hugging, whispering. Elena stepped out last, holding Sophie's hand tightly. That child. Natalie's daughter. My niece's child. The one I was told never took a breath. She was walking. Laughing. Asking where they were going to eat after. I walked across the parking lot. Slowly. Deliberately. Elena looked up. Her face went pale. We stood there, just feet apart. The two women who shared a man and a child, though neither one of us asked for it this way. She started to speak. I shook my head. I didn't need her words. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. I had written it the night I found out about Sophie. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was the story of Natalie. A letter for Sophie. Her real mother's voice through mine. The truth. Not to destroy her world, but to make sure it wasn't built entirely on lies. I handed it to Elena. When she turns 18, I said, you let her read this. She has a right to know who she really is. Elena didn't speak. Her eyes welled. She nodded. Just once. And then I walked away. Not because I forgave her. Not because I pitied her. But because I knew. I was the only one who could give that child her real beginning. Mark died with every secret locked behind his ribs. But I was the one who lived long enough. To tell the truth, I never raised my voice. I never showed up screaming on their doorstep. I never asked for apologies. That was the old me. The woman who waited. The woman who begged for the truth. That Diana was gone. After the funeral, I returned home with something heavy and something clear. I had held the truth inside me for too long. It was time to let it speak. The letter I gave Elena was only the beginning. What Sophie would eventually read was a story, not just about the mother she never knew, but the man who shaped her world through silence. I wrote it as if Natalie were writing it herself. I described how kind she was, how scared, how young, how she wanted to keep the baby, and how he, Mark, convinced her not to tell anyone. How he drove her to doctor appointments behind my back. How he said the baby would ruin her future. How, after her death, he told us the baby was gone, when in fact, he handed her over to the woman who once folded her pajamas. In the envelope I included a copy of the hospital birth records from that night, DNA results I had ordered from an old brush of Natalie's, and a sample I discreetly collected from Sophie's school photos. A lock of her hair from a yearbook print I purchased online. Photos of Natalie as a child, identical to Sophie. Pages from my journals, dated, annotated. A copy of the obituary, the one that erased both me and Natalie from history. I sealed the second copy of the packet in another envelope. And I mailed it. Not to Elena. Not to Sophie. But to Mark's former business partner. The one who ran their boutique wine brand. I had seen his name on business cards, emails, legal documents. I knew they built the company together. And I knew that if there was one thing Mark valued more than appearances, it was control. Letting that man, that business partner, know the true story behind their carefully branded family legacy. That was my storm. The third copy I mailed to a local investigative journalist. A woman who had once written a series on teen pregnancy cover-ups in small towns. She had interviewed me once during a school assembly, years ago. I remembered her face. I remembered that she had a way of listening that didn't just collect facts. It collected silence. I sent her everything. I didn't need her to publish it. I just needed it to live somewhere other than my chest. That was the moment I stopped being afraid. Because I had nothing left to protect. The marriage? A lie. The man? Dead. The child? Deceived. But the truth? The truth still had a pulse. And I finally let it breathe. Some women scream. Some women throw dishes. I wrote. I told the story he tried to bury with himself. And if he could see me now, I hope he knows. I didn't burn down his legacy. I simply opened the windows and let the rot inside be seen. Now this is where things change. If you're still watching, you're one of us. The ones who know that quiet women carry the loudest storms. Hit like and share this with someone who loves a good twist. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories. Truth doesn't always explode. Sometimes it seeps, like water through a crack. Soft at first, until the foundation breaks beneath it. A month after the letters were sent, I got a phone call. It was from a blocked number. I let it ring twice before answering. A quiet voice. Female. Not Elena. Not anyone I recognized. Just, "Is this Diana Caldwell?" I answered yes. The voice paused. Then,
I'm Sophie Kropka.
Just that. I couldn't speak at first. I held the phone like it might vanish. She continued. I got the letter. The one about my mom. My real mom. I whispered. I'm so sorry you had to find out like this. She said.
No.
I'm glad I did. I need to know who she was. We agreed to meet at a public park halfway between our cities.
No cameras. No confrontación.
Just truth. I arrived early. Sat on a bench beneath the same kind of oak tree Natalie used to love reading under. I waited. And then, I saw her. Sophie. Almost a mirror image of Natalie at that age. Her eyes carried that same curious heaviness, the kind you find in old souls. She walked slowly toward me. When she sat beside me, there were no tears. Just silence. Shared. Heavy. Then she said, I feel like I've been living someone else's life. I looked at her, held that moment, and said, so did I. For 22 years. The wind rustled above us. Somewhere a child laughed in the distance. Sophie pulled out a folded photo, One I had sent in the packet. It was of Natalie at 16, standing on a beach barefoot, grinning with wild hair and sunburned cheeks. Sophie stared at it. "She looks like me," she whispered. I nodded. She was brave. Too brave for the world she was in. Sophie asked questions. About Natalie's favorite color. Her laugh. Her dreams. I answered every one. No drama.
No anger.
Just the truth finally sitting where it belonged. I asked if she still lived with Elena. She nodded. Then looked away. She's different now. Tired. People treat her like a liar. I guess she was one. I didn't speak to that. It wasn't my place to tell her how to feel about the woman who raised her. But she added. She told me she was scared. That she thought she was saving me from scandal. From being unwanted. I breathed deeply. She didn't save you from anything. She just delayed your right to the truth. Sophie nodded. She doesn't deny it. I think she's ashamed. She lost everything. I had heard about the boutique business closing. The articles that quietly circulated after the journalists confirmed the story. The investors pulled out. The story was picked up in forums. Mark's name no longer conjured prestige, it brought whispers. Elena had retreated from her social circles. And Sophie had questions no polished branding could answer anymore. After a long pause, Sophie turned to me. "Do you think my mom would have loved me?" I swallowed. My throat tightened. "She loved you before you had a name." Sophie looked away. I wish I could have met her. I gently placed my hand over hers. "In some ways you just did." We sat in silence again. 2 lives bent by lies, but no longer buried beneath them. And in that stillness, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. I didn't burn anyone's world down. I just gave the truth a voice. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing a woman can do. I didn't go back to that town. I didn't need to. Some people chase closure like it's a courtroom verdict, loud, final, public. But real closure, it's quiet. It lives in choices you make when no one is looking. 3 weeks after meeting Sophie, I returned to a place I hadn't visited in years, Natalie's grave. Tucked away at the back of the old cemetery where the headstones lean and the grass grows stubborn. I came alone. No flowers. Just a single frame. Inside it, a photograph I took the day I met Sophie. She was sitting under the oak tree, arms wrapped around her knees, that same thoughtful crease in her brow Natalie used to wear. I knelt beside the stone, ran my fingers over Natalie's name, the dates, the years stolen. I placed the photo at the base of the headstone, anchored it with a small stone. No words came at first. Then I said, "She's beautiful, and she's brave. Just like you." The wind picked up. It carried the scent of spring, the beginning of something new. For years, Mark tried to erase me from his story, rewrote the chapters with his own ink, left me in the margins, a footnote. But truth has a way of editing what time can't. Because now, there's a girl who knows where she came from. A woman who finally stood tall in her silence, and a story that found its ending, not in vengeance, but in voice. Mark died thinking the truth would be buried with him. But in the end, the truth wrote me back in. I stood up, looked at the sky, and walked away. The wind moved around me. My coat lifted slightly. My hands were empty, but my heart, for the first time in years, wasn't. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, cry, or inspired you, leave a comment and tell me your thoughts. And hey, don't just subscribe, join our family. Turn on that bell, so you never miss a story that needs to be told.